Welcome to Herbally Yours, an adventure into the world of natural medicine. Here is your host, Dr. Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse who will help you take the leap to ultimate wellness.
Greetings, and thank you for joining me, Ellen Kamai, the natural nurse, for another edition of Herbally Yours, right here on the voice of Nassau Community College, 90.3 WHPC. You can listen on air or online at iHeartRadio, Odyssey, TuneIn app, smart speakers, nccradio.org, or anywhere that you prefer to listen to your podcasts. Also, Herbally Yours continues to bring you the latest information about the many facets in the world of natural living. And today we have two guests together, and that is David Miller and Erich Maelzer. And we're going to be talking about everything cannabis and also flow gardens at flowgardens.com. David started out going to MIT, Oglethorpe, and the University of Tennessee, and held board positions with the Emory Global Health Institute during COVID, where he advised the former CDC director and also Jane Fonda's organization, GCAP, and led global business leaders for 10 years with Entrepreneurs Organization. Erich has been a technically savvy cannabis cultivator for many decades. Together, they own Flow Gardens, which believes in cultivating health and happiness through premium quality cannabis growth and teaching. The company is changing the perception by educating customers and consumers about the health and wellness benefits across the entire spectrum of cannabinoids. So thank you for joining us so much today. Let's go back in history, and either of you can sort of share first about what led to your partnership.
Oh, wow. Well, first of all, thanks for having us on today. Appreciate the time. And so the question is what led to the beginning of Flow Gardens and how did it start? Did I hear that correctly?
Yes. And also, your partnership between David and yourself.
Okay. So, I started Flow Gardens right over 3 years ago. We're an indoor cultivation company in East Tennessee, and we focus on alternative cannabinoids. And I met David, I guess this is right over 2 years ago. My good friend Chad, who also happens to be our head salesman here, introduced me to David. And at the time, he was just looking for something that sparked his interest, and cannabis was that thing. And so we kind of hit it off and just kept talking about getting into business together. And now here we are 2 years later.
So it's, not many years, but you're sort of working on this newer kind of project. I'll tell you, I grew cannabis indoors in 1969, and I had quite a large growing greenhouse, and it was in Arizona, actually in Bisbee, Arizona. And what we did is we raised rabbits in a big indoor facility, and then the rabbits basically had rabbit droppings, which were excellent for making soil. And then in those droppings, we kept worms, which in and of themselves was a cash crop, especially in Arizona, where worms don't occur naturally in the soil. And then in that, we grew cannabis plants, and they really became, I would say, like trees. And of course, we're talking about decades and decades ago, long before we actually could get, let's say, a legal license, which you guys can get now. So we had a wonderful experience doing that. But how is your greenhouse set up?
So ours is, it's all indoor. So we have 6 different flower rooms, and they all average about 800 square feet in each one. And each one houses around 400 plants. Every flower room is a different method of growing because we're an R&D facility, and we're trying to collect data and figure out the most efficient way of growing the plant, and then also how to get the most out of the plant as far as cannabinoids and terpenes and other things like that. So each flower room, we have an organic living soil. So it also has earthworms, kind of like what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have different methods of hydroponics. We have a flood and drain room, or an ebb and flow, where the water goes up and down one time a day. And then we have a top feed room with a drip system, so they get fed through drippers. And then we also have recirculating deep water culture. It's more of an advanced type of hydroponics, and it's where the plant's roots grow in water. That's their medium, or their soil, so to be. And it's heavily oxygenated, so it works really well. So that's kind of how we're set up. And then it's a perpetual harvest. So we harvest the room every 14 days. Growing indoors, that allows us to have many more harvests than if we did outdoor, and constant fresh flower for our customers.
So are you using grow lights or natural lighting?
Grow lights. We use all LED lighting indoors.
And it must be just a beautiful, and must really have a wonderful scent in those rooms.
Oh, yeah. Like when you pull up to our facility and you get out of your car, you can smell it coming out of the building.
Well, it's just amazing to me, because of the rapid legalization and the increased use. There was just something on the news, actually, as I was driving to the station today, when I was listening in the car, and they were talking about New York City having the largest use of cannabis of anywhere in the world.
Really?
Yeah, that was on the news today, like on the regular mainstream, 880 news source, not the alternative news or anything. So I was really surprised to hear. I mean, it's such a huge business right now. So, and then the complication that laws are different state to state. So what is it like in Tennessee?
Tennessee is one of the few states with no medical program. We don't have any medical or recreational marijuana. But what we do have is a really good hemp bill. The farm bill that's been out, we're allowed to grow hemp, which is the same thing. It's a cannabis plant. Hemp is the definition of 0.3% THC or lower. Those are the plants that we grow here, and our main focus is, like I said, alternative cannabinoids. So we grow high CBD plants, CBG, which is another cannabinoid, and then we also have CBC plants, which is a newer cannabinoid we just discovered. So that's pretty much where we're at in Tennessee right now. We eventually hope that we can get a medical program, and then we can it's one of the reasons we started a brand, was if that happens, we're kind of first in line, so to speak, to get a license.
Ahead of the game. So right now it's okay, because it was actually a rather recent farm bill that is allowing hemp as a non-regulated product. However, it's still difficult on the market in terms of selling things even that are called CBD, in terms of various regulations.
Right. Yeah. It's definitely it's a roller coaster of an industry,
It really is. Now, one of the things that I do a lot of in my, regulatory capacity is actually work with companies to see, for instance, there's a big pushback about having CBD on the front of the label. But if you use instead on any product that you're offering something that says hemp flower extract, that's okay,
Yeah,
So
it's little things like that. It's just trying to navigate through it.
It's true. But so you're really started this because you have a love of growing and about offering these things. And people can go to flowgardens.com. What would they find there at flowgardens.com?
Flowgardens.com, we sell all kinds of smokable flower, as well as pre-rolls, gummies. We have edibles, that kind of stuff.
So it's basically kind of a store. It's not just about information about where you're growing and how you're growing.
Exactly. Yeah, it's a retail store.
But let's talk more about then the science behind it. Now, to explain to our listeners, what is the difference in a definitional point between something that would be called hemp and something that would be called either marijuana, which that use isn't being used that much, or high THC cannabis?
So the short answer of that is they're both the same plant. They're both the cannabis sativa plant. The definition of hemp is the cannabis plant below 0.3% Delta 9 THC, and then anything above that would be considered marijuana.
Okay. Now, in terms of that, so are you using specific plant cultivars that are known to produce that lower amount?
Exactly. Yeah, there's seed breeders all around the country that breed the THC out of the plant and breed the CBD in it. And those are the kind of genetics that we source.
And are you growing from seed or from small plants?
Both. So we start with the seed and do what we call a pheno hunt, which is finding the plants with the best expressions as far as smells and looks. And then we'll take that and take a cut of it and grow it out and make that a mother plant. And then from there, we can take as many duplicates of that genetic as we want.
What made you decide to go into this business since, as you already described, there's a lot of challenges?
I've been growing now for over a couple decades, just small at the house, hobby type stuff. And then about 6 years ago, found out that the hemp laws and the genetics were far enough to where I could grow the same plant indoors legally in Tennessee. And that's kind of how I got started. And it's like a light bulb going off. And then we've continued down that road ever since.
And that's what, is going on with the business. So let's talk about the difference. I'm sure many people are not aware of what would be the difference between CBD. What are some of the things that is actually useful for?
So in our business, like I said, we do a lot of smokable flowers. So it's not going to be psychoactive, number one, like marijuana. So you're not going to get high per se. That being said, all the terpenes, which is all the smells and the flavors in the plant, they add to the effects. So you will get a head change or effects from smoking CBD. I use it a lot for anxiety. It helps big time. And then also if I can't sleep, it helps a lot with that as well.
Okay, and I just want to make a disclaimer here because actually those are to make a claim about a product is actually not legal, just so everyone knows, according to the FDA and FTC. So I'm hoping you don't have those things on your website because that would be a big alarm value. And perhaps you want to do a regulatory review of the verbiage that you might have on your website. But it's certainly, there are a lot of scientific studies showing that it can be very helpful to help bring on a calm mood and help with sleep difficulties. We never could use the word insomnia. That would be illegal. So we might have to have a discussion about those things so that, helps you stay out of trouble while allowing things to be available on the marketplace. Tell us.
Yeah, if you don't mind me jumping in, I think that's one of the really interesting things that's going on with the cannabis plant is that, it is so new. It's been, for lack of better words, suppressed by the government via regulations for so long. And, there have been studies, one of the Schedule I manufacturing facilities that's been around for decades is in Mississippi. Now there's around, 10 of those just within the past 3 years that have come up. So the research is really starting to come along. And you're right. We don't know a lot of the, medicinal benefits, certainly not as a doctor, health practitioner, which Erich and I are not. But what is amazing is that, we have 15,000 plus customers and some of them will drive up here. Some of them will send us letters, some of the more older school folks. And then a lot of them will just get email responses and they'll tell us, through their testimonials, I've had back pain. I've had inflammation in my knee. Your salves have helped with some stuff with their skin. So, I'm really encouraged to see some of this research come out so it can clarify what are the benefits of cannabidiol and the other cannabinoids out there. So we can say with certainty, hey, this helps or assists with, a lot of these conditions that there's just not clarity around yet.
That's true. However, you're talking about two different things, and let me just educate you a little bit in terms of herbal medicine in general, not even cannabis. Let's take a plant that's, something well-known like echinacea. perhaps you've heard of echinacea. So echinacea is an herb that is very well documented in mainstream medical literature to help with the immune system. We even know the action it has on the immune system. It causes white blood cells to move around more effectively, recognize any kind of invading microorganism, and engulf that. So that is there. The science is completely there, and that's what we know scientifically. And I can say that legally, and I've written 16 books about herbal medicine. I can discuss it in my books. I can refer to the studies. However, now when we move to a company that is selling echinacea as an herbal supplement, they cannot say any of that. Not on their website, not on their label, not in their sales literature at all. So there's a completely big disconnect between acting as an educational vehicle, like, today we can educate our listeners about things, the difference between, let's say, CBD and CBG, and we will. But yet you cannot mention any of those things that you just said as a company that sells those products. I know that sounds like a very strange disconnect, and it's certainly not a rule that I made up, but that is the rules according to both the FDA and the FTC. So that's, yet another struggle that any company, not only doing cannabis, but any kind of natural therapeutics needs to know. So even though it's proven, and even though it's scientific, and even though it might have been used for centuries, you're not allowed to say so if you are selling the product. And that has led, some people, especially after they get attacked by the FDA and FCC, which can be extremely expensive. We're talking about $3 million fines. So what they often do will set up like two companies, one which has the sales connected to it, and another one which is informational only with no link to products. And that changes the vista of what you can share, especially on your website. It's one thing to just, do it on air here. We can do it, but I'm saying I didn't take a look at your website. But if you say any of the things you're sharing here, it sounds to me like you're not aware of that just by your vocabulary, because a lot of it is the vocabulary. So words like anxiety, words like pain, those are things that act like little bot robots. It attracts the bots that are being sent out to look for the incorrect use of those terms. So that's why, I'm just wondering, perhaps you're not aware of all that because you're a rather young company. But unfortunately, that's yet another hurdle that many natural products, have to know about. You either know about it or you learn the hard way when you get your first love letter from the FDA, which is not at all fun. But let's talk about what is the difference. Like you said, CBD. What about CBG? You shared that that's not as much is known about that. So how would you get a plant that has a higher level of CBG than some other plant?
So it's all in the genetics. So if I was to grow out, say 20 CBG plants, we have our own testing lab, so I could take leaf samples really early and kind of see the genetic makeup of that plant. And if I wanted to breed for a higher level, I would take the two highest ones and then breed them together, which the seeds from those parent plants would probably have a higher level of CBG in that case.
And then you would test the plant to see, do you have a laboratory there that tests for these different actives?
Exactly. Yeah, we have our own laboratory. It's an HPLC machine that tests for 14 different kind of cannabinoids.
So you test different plants, and then you specifically chose them to grow, so you know which ones are going to have a higher amount of one versus the other.
Exactly.
And why would a customer or someone want to have, let's say, something that's higher in CBG?
Yeah, one of the things that's a great question. One of the things that we found that through studies that have been done, not by us, just me being a research nerd, is that CBG is a non-psychoactive cannabinoid, so it doesn't give you that high that tetrahydrocannabinol does, or that delta 9. And not only that, CBG is a CB1 receptor agonist, which means that it counteracts or evens out the psychoactive cannabinoids. So there are a couple reasons to kind of simplify it a little bit. Is CBG is, in addition to some of the studies that have said that have been told to be cancer fighting agents, CBG is kind of like drinking a cup of coffee, is what I've experienced. And it is not psychoactive, so you're not going to get high, and you can function, throughout the day with it. And again, in my experience, and so someone who is interested in getting into cannabis in maybe a more conservative way, as opposed to some of the medicinal recreational cannabis products out there that do have that high THC level, CBG is kind of a good way to learn about the plant in an exploratory manner.
And, what's the difference then? Another one that you mentioned, and you said it's, of course, none of these are new. This plant is ancient, right, since the beginning of time. So all of these have existed in this plant, but like you said, they're being newly discovered and investigated. So what about the CBC?
Yeah, so, and Erich can chime in here because he's the grower that discovered this through his pheno hunting, is that if you look at a lot of the products out there, most all of them, if not all of them, and I know that's a pretty bold statement, the CBC levels are usually less than 0.2%.
So that's something that's often very low in just a naturally occurring plant.
Correct. And one of our phenos, the one that Erich discovered, it has about 4% CBC in it. So not only does it have a wildly high, relatively speaking, level of cannabigerol in it, cannabichromene, it's a new genetic that we haven't had, and we're happy to start finding more crosses with it and see if we can breed those cannabinoid levels higher by finding another CBC plant, or just doing it through other methods.
So, Erich, how did you discover this? Why would you even be looking for it if it's normally so low?
I actually wasn't looking for it. I was going through my normal pheno hunts, testing my leaf samples, and I just kind of stumbled upon it. And then I took that plant and took a cutting from it, and then continued growing it out. And so it was kind of by accident. I wasn't even looking for it.
That's a great story, because a lot of plant genetics, that's how it's happened. Through people in the field, testing things and finding, even with regular fruits and vegetables, that a particular one has a higher vitamin C level, something like that. So that's really interesting that you just happenstanced upon it, but then you recognize that it could be very useful.
Exactly. Yeah, a lot of my genetics have come by accident. So that's a very true statement.
Right. And then you are able, though, because of your expertise as a grower. Now, you obviously would have to get seeds from that plant, right? Is that one way, or are you just doing it through propagation?
Just through propagation. We take cuttings. I have a mother plant of it, so we haven't bred with it yet, but we definitely have plans to in the future.
So sometimes you might let a plant go to seed?
Yeah, like if we have a really interesting plant that we want to cross with something else that's interesting, then we'll make seed with that. We usually do it in our tents, something that's away from the actual production room. So.
Oh, right. So if it's something you don't want, it doesn't spread all over the place. That's a wise grower's trick.
All over the place.
Yeah, right. Exactly. That's why they have so much, which we call sin semilla. Sin semilla, which sin means, it's a Spanish term, and sin semilla means without seed. And, anyone who speaks Spanish knows sin is without. So, right, that's the usual way that's done in these large growing facilities, for sure. So one thing that's interesting from a business perspective is the banking situation, which there's actually been shows on 60 Minutes and things like that about in your industry. What can you share about that?
Yeah. I have an interesting story that happened within the past maybe year and a half. I've tried to block it out. It caused a little bit of trauma, and I shouldn't joke about that. No, it was so we got a letter in the mail. We banked through Fifth Third, and our letter told us that we had I don't remember the exact time frame, maybe 30 days, couple weeks, to remove all the monies from our accounts because we're not in compliance with their policies. And no notification, no
Friendly phone
call, none of that. So luckily we had found a cannabis-friendly, a hemp-friendly bank at one of our, I think it was a Southern Hemp Expo in Nashville that we had met, and they luckily had a local office here in Knoxville, and we were in the process of setting up some backup accounts. But it's not an easy feat whenever you're a 7-figure plus growing business with all the balls you're juggling to get a letter saying, sorry, your banking needs, all your ACH, all your systems that you have set up are just going to be shut down. Yeah. So you got to start a whole new treasury management system. You got to, all the fun stuff with that.
And we have heard similar things from many people with this, new budding industry in the U.S. So, hopefully you'll get past that challenge as well. Well, I want to thank you both so much for being a guest here on Herbally Yours. And I think the best place for people to find out more would be to go to flowgardens.com. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
you.
you.
Can go there. And then we have an Instagram, flowgardens420_2.0.
Okay, excellent. And thank you so much for joining us. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Herbally Yours, produced in the studios of 90.3 WHPC, Nassau Community College, Garden City, New York. For further information, email us at whpc@ncc.edu. This is your host, Ellen Kamai at naturalnurse.com, inviting you to join us next week for another edition of Herbally Yours. Until then, stay healthy.